Welcome, everyone. I am Sharon Green Middleton, Vice President of the City Council, representative for the 6th Council District, and Chairperson for the Economic and Community Development Committee. This afternoon, we will hear the following bills. Bill number 21-0077R, Informational Hearing Implementation of Landlord Licensing, which we're going to hear last. We're going to get the zoning bills out of the way first. And the zoning bills are 22-0217, franchise storm drain outfall. Number 3, bill number 24-0475, that's a release of a 20-inch right-of-way identified as parcel 3, as shown on plat RW20-34176, and release of a 10-foot right-of-way identified as parcel 2, as shown on plat RW20-34429, and then bill number 24-0476, partial release of a right-of-way for municipal utilities and services through the residents at Roland Heights. Present today, members of the committee, we have Mark Conway of the 4th District, Odette Ramos of the 14th District, and Robert Stokes of the 12th District. John Bullock of the 9th District might be joining us momentarily. He has a ribbon cutting, I think, of Holland's Market today, which is very important. And representative from the Office of the President, we have Tiffany Macklin, Deputy Director of Legislation, sitting in the back. And of the representative for the Office of the Mayor, we have Tyler Shanella of the Government Relations. And we're going to start with the franchise storm drain, bill number 22-0217, for the purpose of granting a franchise to 701 Canton LLC to construct, use, and maintain the storm drain outfall located in the city's Lower Gwynn Falls Park, adjacent to 707 South Caton Avenue, Baltimore, Maryland, 21229, subject to certain terms, conditions, and reservations, and providing for a special effective date. This bill was introduced on April 4th, 2022. This bill was sponsored by Council President for the administration, and we'll start with agency reports and City Solicitor's Office.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michelle Toth on behalf of the City Solicitor's Office, and we approve for form and legal sufficiency.
Thank you. Approve for form and legal sufficiency. Planning Department.
Good afternoon. This is Caitlin Audette with the Planning Department. We have no objection and defer to DPW.
Thank you. Housing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason Wright, representing the Department of Housing and Community Development. We respectfully stand behind our favorable bill report.
Thank you. Transportation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Luciano Diaz, DOT. We stand by our favorable bill report.
Thank you. Fire Department.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is Chief Ames, Officer of the Fire Marshal. Fire Department does not have any objections to Council Bill 2022-0217.
Thank you. Finance Department.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Gabriel Stewart-Zykowicz, reporting for the Finance Department. We reiterate our does not oppose stance.
Thank you. Public Works.
Report for them and we Park Authority.
And the Parking Authority.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Nicole Caesar from the Parking Authority.
Oh, could you?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Nicole Caesar from the Parking Authority. We're not opposed to this bill.
Thank you. And Public Works, Department of Public Works.
Hi, Alejandra Ivanovich, Department of Public Works. We stand by our report.
Okay. Did you get their report for our file?
Oh, okay.
So we need a written report.
Okay.
Could you,
Which one is this?
Public Works,
Which bill?
DPW,
What bill?
Yeah.
Bill number?
the franchise storm drain,
220217.
217, 22-0217. But it was no objection, we just need a copy in our files. Okay. Do committee members have any questions or comments on this franchise storm drain? Hearing none. Do we have any in-person testimony? And we have no in-person testimony on this bill, and we're going to check to make sure there's no one online. And there's no one online. Is there a motion to move this bill favorable? So moved by Ramos, second. Second by Stokes. Chair Middleton's yes. Bullock is absent. Conway? Yes. Is a yes. Dorsey absent. Glover absent. Ramos? Yes. Is a yes. Stokes? Yes. Is a yes. This bill, there's 4 yays and 3 absences. This bill will be able to move to the next meeting of the City Council. The next bill, number 24-0475, and that's the release of a 20-inch right-of-way identified as parcel 3 as shown on plat RW 20-34176, and release of a 10-foot right-of-way identified as parcel 2 as shown on plat RW 20-34429 for the purpose of authorizing the release and surrender by the mayor and city council of Baltimore of all of its interests in and to a 20-foot wide right-of-way and a 10-foot wide right-of-way through the property of Weldon Heights Homes, Inc., as shown on plats RW 20-34176 and RW 20-34429 on file in the Office of the Department of Transportation and providing for a special effective date. This bill was introduced on January 8th, 2024. The sponsor of the bill is the council president on behalf of the administration, and we'll go ahead and get agency reports, City Solicitor's Office.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The City Solicitor's Office approves for form and legal sufficiency with a technical amendment to correct the citation of authority, which I believe has been drafted.
Yes. Okay. Yes, we have it. Thank you. Favorable report. Planning Commission.
The Planning Commission recommended the approval of this item.
Thank you. Department of Real Estate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Christine Griffin with Department of Real Estate, and we stand by our favorable report.
Thank you. Department of Transportation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Luciano Diaz, DOT. We stand by our favorable bill report.
Thank you. Finance.
Gabriel Stewart Sikowitz here for Finance. We stand by our supportive bill report.
Thank you. Do committee members have any comments or questions? Okay, we're going to check any in-person testimony. There's a no. Any online? Is a no. Is there a motion to move the amendment? So moved by Conway, second by Stokes. Middleton is a yes. Conway? Yes. Is a yes. Ramos? Yes. Is a yes. And Stokes? Yes. Is a yes. This bill will move to second reader at the next, oops, we gotta move the bill. Is there a motion to move the bill favorable? So moved by Conway, second by Stokes. Chair Middleton, yes. Conway is a yes. Ramos is a yes. And Stokes is a yes. Okay, this bill will move to second reader at the next council meeting as amended. Next, we will hear Bill number 24-0476, which is a partial release of right-of-way for municipal utilities and services through the residents at Roland Heights, formerly Headwind Properties, for the purpose of authorizing the release and surrender of the mayor and city council of Baltimore of all its interests in and to the variable with right-of-way heretofore granted the city of Baltimore, the location and course of the variable with right-of-way to be released being shown on the plat numbered RW 20-36464 and providing for a special effective date. This bill was introduced on January 8th, 2024. Again, another bill sponsored by the council president for the administration, and agency reports are as followed. City Solicitor's Office.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Approved for form and legal sufficiency with the same technical amendment to correct the citation of authority.
Okay, thank you. Approved with an amendment. Real Estate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Christine Griffin, Department of Real Estate. We stand by our favorable report.
Thank you. Transportation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Luciano Diaz, DOT. We stand by our favorable bill report.
Thank you. General Services on this one.
The Department of General Services stands by their bill report, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Planning.
Caitlin Audette with the Department of Planning. The Planning Commission voted to recommend approval.
Thank you. And Finance.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Gabriel Stewart-Sykowitz again, here for Department of Finance. We stand by our supportive report.
Thank you. Do committee members have any comments or questions? Hearing none, we're checking for public testimony. No public testimony, and online? No online testimony. Is there a motion to move the amendment for the Law Department? So moved by Stokes and second by Ramos. Middleton, yes. Conway? Yes. Yes. Ramos? Yes. And Stokes? Yes. Is there a motion to move the bill favorable as amended? So moved by Stokes, second by Ramos. Middleton, yes. Conway is a yes. Ramos is a yes. And Stokes is a yes. This bill will move to second reader at the next council meeting. And then lastly, we will hear Bill number 21-0077R, which is informational hearing for the implementation of landlord licensing for the purpose of requesting representatives from the Law Department, Department of Housing and Community Development, and Department of Public Works appear before the council to provide a comprehensive report about progress made on the implementation of Council Bill 18-0185, which is non-owner occupied dwelling units, rooming houses, and vacant structures, rental dwellings, registration, and licensing. This bill was introduced on October 18th, 2021, and sponsored by Councilmember Ramos. Comments from the sponsor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee. Yes, I introduced this about 3 years ago and waited, I think, at the request of the department because the bill had passed in 2018, and then shortly after we had COVID. And so there were some challenges with implementation of the landlord licensing law. And I think now that we've gotten out of that and there's been a flow in terms of the applications and licensing, wanted to just have this hearing to kind of see where things are in implementation of the bill. I know that a few hearings ago relative to a different subject, but it came up that only about 50% of the properties that are rental properties are actually licensed. And what I'm trying to explore really is what else we should be doing. I think there are some drawbacks to the bill that I see relative to enforcement, relative to what we could be doing, because I have 3 examples in my district, I'll talk about 2, where the landlord has been cited multiple times for non-registration as well as non-licensing. He continues to rent out his property, and so there doesn't seem to be any recourse for these folks that intentionally decide they're not going to follow the law. And I would like to figure out what to do. Now, granted, if they are trying to evict, they cannot evict without a rental license. But frankly, my experience with another property is such that that doesn't necessarily happen at the court level. It is the sheriff's office that ends up having to do that, to say, look, this property is not licensed, and so we're not going to evict. So I'm just trying to figure this out. And so this is just a hearing to have a dialogue about, what's the progress and what we can do better in this for, if there's going to be a potential bill. I do have a constituent here to testify. And, I put out a broad call as well, because if there are landlords having trouble with, the current system, I'd like to, hear about that as well. So that's really the purpose of this hearing. And I appreciate the time that you're giving us, Madam Chair, to have this discussion. Again, it's just a hearing. We're not, we don't have a bill before us, but I'm trying to just get a sense of what else could we be doing? Because this guy at 1501 East 29th Street is really, really bad. And I can point out a couple of them as well, but there doesn't seem to be any recourse to take on this guy. And so that exploring, what is that, in the law right now, it says that the commissioner can move the tenants out. But shouldn't there be more? So anyway, so that's one of the questions. And then anything that is, any other challenges that people are having with it, I'd love to be able to have the discussion. And that will be, what we do today. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I do want to recognize Councilman Bullock of the 9th District has joined us. I did mention that you were missing because you had a wonderful ribbon cutting today for Holland's Market, so congratulations to you. We're going to go ahead and get the approval for, we're going to save housing for last because they have a PowerPoint for us. So we'll go ahead and start with the City Solicitor's Office.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hillary Ruley, on behalf of the City Solicitor's Office, we approve the resolution for form and legal sufficiency.
Thank you, Hillary. Finance Department.
Gabriel Stewart-Sykowitz here for the Finance Department. In our report, we summarized the revenues generated from registrations since 2014, the fiscal year 2014. The only thing that I would want to add to that was that just remember that between May 2019, for those of you that were here, like I was, we had a bit of a cyber attack, and so that definitely had some impact on it. And then that kind of rolled right into COVID. So those might have some explanation for some of the fluctuations starting around fiscal year 20. But other than that, happy to answer any questions that the committee has.
Thank you for refreshing our memory on the cyber attack. And Public Works.
Alejandra Ivanovich, Department of Public Works. We have no position on this bill. We were not part of the original legislation.
Okay, thank you for that. And now we'll go ahead with Department of Housing and Community Development, and you have a PowerPoint.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All right. Go back, okay. There we go. Okay. So the topics addressed by this bill, this was all written into the legislation. The increase in licensed properties so that rental assistance could be received during the COVID-19 pandemic. The estimated number of properties that have yet to be licensed. The properties that have clearly not complied with the law and therefore need strict consequences. Resources needed to fully implement the law, and any suggested changes to the legislation. Starting off with licensed properties and rental assistance during the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, when this was originally introduced in 2021, we were still in the depths of that. It was a much more immediate concern. The rental assistance program was implemented in September of 2020 at DHCD, but by November 2020, it had been transferred to the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. Both DHCD and MOCFS required landlords that were unlicensed to obtain rental licenses in order to participate in the program. But statistics were not kept on the number of properties licensed because of rental assistance denials. I reached out to a representative from MOCFS to see if that very specific line of information was kept, and they said no. There were obviously complications making any sort of causal relationship here very difficult to ascertain, just given the craziness of the pandemic, but also there was a moratorium on evictions that was in place until late 2021, and at the time, you could not evict without license due to case law, and in 2023, that has since been codified into law. Our current estimated number of properties that have yet to be licensed, of 55,000 estimated total rental properties, we estimate that 33,000 still need to be licensed. That's rental properties within Baltimore City, and that would amount to a figure of 39% that are currently licensed. Wanted to go into a little bit into how we identify unlicensed properties. Landlords can complete licensing because of a failure to pay rent action. Our Special Investigations Unit identifies properties through investigation requests and other actions not related to rental licensing, and just general complaints that are received from community members. In terms of enforcement against those unlicensed properties, the Special Investigations Unit investigates complaints to locate sufficient evidence to produce that the property is currently rented or being offered for rent without a license. If sufficient evidence is gathered, a $1,000 citation is issued to the owner, and that citation, if unpaid, will double and then become a lien on the property. Actions to increase rental license compliance. A bit of good news in that area. We recently hired 4 new staff members for our Special Investigations Unit who are absolutely critical to these operations. We also had some ideas that might be helpful, such as the creation of a 311 service request specifically to report possible unlicensed rental properties. We could further work with data analysts to proactively identify more unlicensed rentals. We could also do automated reminder notices to currently licensed rental properties prior to the expiration of those licenses. And we could increase enforcement actions against properties that have clearly not complied with the law. In terms of resources that are needed to fully implement the law, first and foremost, the law is fully implemented. Offending properties without the license, as I just mentioned, are given a $1,000 fine, and then that can double and become a lien. What would help in terms of the sort of better figures with the actualization of all of this would be increased staffing in both our license and registration area and in our special investigations unit. In both cases, this has proven to be challenging. It has proven to be particularly challenging in license and registration. We do have issues with staff turnover. It is higher than we would like, and that obviously affects retention. And those are definitely pain points. In terms of any suggested changes to the legislation, the current bill 23-0357, Strengthening Renter Safety Act, does address many of the concerns that we have. Examples that would help in this regard that are included in that legislation would be having all rental licenses last 2 years rather than being part of a scaled system of 1, 2, or 3 years. No longer being able to transfer rental licenses between properties. It would also increase the number of days that an inspection is valid prior to submission to DHCD. And it would allow newly constructed apartments to be advertised for rent prior to receiving a license. And that's our presentation. I also have Deputy Commissioner Hessler here with me today to assist in any questions that may arise. Thank you.
Thank you for that information. I guess my first question, what are some of the requirements or qualifications for the staff that you're looking for this particular job?
Good morning, or good afternoon, I'm sorry. Jason Hessler, Deputy Commissioner, Permits and Litigation for Department of Housing and Community Development. There were 2 positions that were spoken of. On the enforcement side, most of the enforcement here falls to the Special Investigations Unit, which would be a code investigator. The qualifications there, they do have to be able to pass a criminal background check because they end up getting sworn in at the police department as special enforcement officers.
Do they have to go through an apprenticeship?
We do not have an apprenticeship with SIU. We do have an apprenticeship with our housing inspectors.
Right.
And on occasion, some housing inspectors do see the SIU unit as an opportunity for advancement within the agency. So we've had former housing inspectors that are now investigators. And then for the office support specialist in the registration office that process the paperwork, they're OSS positions. So you have to have a high school diploma in order to apply for that position. That's been a particularly difficult position to fill throughout the city, is my understanding. I currently, within permits and litigation, not just in registration, but throughout all of my divisions, or sections rather, have 5 openings right now. We have interviews scheduled for tomorrow, and there's 27 applicants for the entire city. So
they just need a high school diploma?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. And have you gotten that information in any of the high schools? Seniors, trying to maybe tap into the seniors graduating from high school?
Yeah, I mean, that's, our human resources does some of that. We had a couple of hiring fairs where we were successful in hiring for some positions, including investigator was one of those positions that we were successful at a hiring fair in the spring. So we've done internally 2, and I think Maine DHR has done at least 1.
What's the starting salary for that job?
The OSS positions are like 38, I believe.
Okay.
And then the investigators are in the 50s. I forget exactly what it is.
Okay. Any other questions from, yes, Councilman Stokes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess just looking at the chart, I'm looking at fiscal year 2022, and the budget revenue was $5,306,000, and the actual revenue was $3,901,000, and we had a negative of $1,404,000, and the same thing happened in 2023. My question is, because Deputy Commissioner Jason, you know, we've been here before, and I actually asked you about code enforcement. You don't even have enough people to cover code enforcement. And I just mentioned it, the renewal of the licenses, y'all have it for 2 years. And I said it before, why don't we do it 1 year like we do liquor license? So if somebody, you giving them 2 years and they ain't registering at all, do it 1 year just like you do liquor license. Because now you got to track them down for 2 years of rental license. And they not even looking at the chart, they not even doing the rental license, they're not renewing it. So I think if we go back to like the liquor board, when you gotta renew your liquor license once a year, why are we not doing that? Or have you looked into doing that, Deputy Commissioner?
Sure. So from a revenue aspect, the licensing doesn't impact the revenue because property registration is where the revenue is collected. So all properties, whether they're rental or not, that are non-owner occupied, are required to be registered, and that is an annual requirement. So in order to get your license, you must be registered, and then complete your inspections and do other things. So there is no fee directly tied to the license. The fees are all with the registration, and that is an annual fee. So that carries on even if you are with a 2-year or a 3-year license.
So real quick, but this really don't affect most people that are in the city, I believe, are doing right and making sure they do the rental license. But when you giving someone 2 years, and you can look at it and see the same people, like that fire that happened over in the 1st District, somebody passed away in a house fire. They never even registered their rental license. So now we're giving people who are not going to register it, whether it's 3 years, 2 years, because the people that's doing right going to register their vehicle. I mean, their license, whether it's 1 year, 2 years. I'm saying to tighten up a little bit more. Is there any way that house can now go from 2 years to 1 year, and I use the liquor board, their liquor license. So if they got some violations before that year is up, then they have to straighten that out like what you just said, but not wait to 2 years to do it. Why we can't look at 1 year? Is that an issue for housing?
It does create more work on the staff that are already facing a large amount of work. When the bill originally passed, the idea was to incentivize landlords to keep their properties up, and in order to do that, the incentive was get a longer license if you don't have violations or you address your violations quickly. In practice, that has been difficult and more taxing to do the 1, 2, and 3 years. So with the Strengthening Renters Act bill, there was an amendment in there to amend our licensing law so that everybody would have a 2-year license and not have this scaled 1, 2, and 3 year. Is it possible to go to 1 year? It's possible, but we felt like 2 years would be a good balance on what we could do in order to process permit applications and kind of do extra work to try and identify and go after people that are not licensed and never have been licensed. At the same time, balancing out the costs to landlords, because those costs just end up getting passed on to tenants. And so while there's not a license fee, they are going to be paying to have those properties inspected. And that fee definitely would get passed on in the cost of doing business. So we're balancing that out.
So just one more question then. If the 1 year is a lot of staff work, have y'all looked at the data, and I know it's early, to look at the 2 years and see how many people still registered and then look at the person. I know y'all get more work. Y'all got more work anyway because you're understaffed. So that always gonna be there, I guess. So have you looked at the data when you do the 2 years, is the same as the 1 year? So if somebody had to register in 2 years and 1 year, are you still getting the same data, whether it's 2 years and 1 year, that the same people are still not registering their rental license?
Yeah, I don't have specific numbers on that, but in my experience, the people that are getting their licenses are continuing to get their license. They want to operate within the boundaries of the law and be on the up and up and not have to deal with any of the stress or headache that would come with going to district court and filing a failure to pay rent action just to have it tossed out because they're not licensed. So the percentage of people do try, there's people out there that do try to do it right, and whether they get a 1 year, 2 year, or 3 year, they're going to continue to do it right. It's just going to cost them more money and time.
Thank you.
Councilman Conway. Is that who that is? I'm just kidding. I want to recognize Councilman Glover. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I realize we consistently have this conversation around limited manpower and our ability to enforce laws like these. I know we have small but mighty team, but it would always be great to have a larger and mightier team. That said, I was kind of sitting here trying to think about what we could do to streamline efforts and think, work smarter. I was curious if we've at all leveraged any data to identify likely opportunities to notify folks that they should register as a rental unit. My thought is water bills, permits, former rental units, folks that don't renew, do we send reminders or warnings if they don't do it after a certain point? For people who we, in our records, have them owning multiple properties, do we automatically send out notifications to those multiple properties? Any LLCs that own properties, of course, they would have to register those properties. And then anything from tax records that would help us to simplify or streamline the likely instances where someone is renting a unit. Realizing that we only have a pretty small team and we have a lot of things we want that team to do, and we keep asking you guys to do more and more, are we leveraging any of these potential data sources in hyper-focusing on the highly likelihood of potential rental units that should be registering?
In the PowerPoint presentation, when we were talking about the data analyst piece of it, that's exactly what we're talking about, is using some data analytics on exactly some of the sources that you talked about. Although the multiple properties, I didn't have a note on that. That is a good one to add to it. Also, we have 311 interior complaints. Those are easier ones to establish that it's a rental property because you have a tenant complaining about something. You don't generally get those complaints from a homeowner on their own house, although it's happened a couple times over the years. So the answer is yes. We need to do that. We've identified the need to do that. The holdup really has been the staffing piece of it. At least 3 years, we've been operating at about 63% of the staff that in SIU. We're now at 94%, I think it is, 93%. So we have one open position in SIU. I have one open position in the licensing department. So we're in a good place right now, and hopefully tomorrow we'll find somebody good and be able to offer them a job and be fully staffed in the licensing department. So we're in a good position there, and we can work with our data analyst teams to kind of pull some of that data, and for some of it, just go straight to enforcement. For other stuff, send out notices, reminding people that they need to, just kind of depending on how confident we are in the amount of time it would take to prove, and substantiate the citation. So if we got good evidence, we can move forward with citations. If it's kind of this looks like it's probably a rental, but maybe it's not, maybe it's something else, then a letter go out saying, here's how to register, here's how to license, and trying to bump up the numbers that way. Thank you.
And when we send that letter out, does it send if you don't register, you will be fined $1,000? Is that made clear to folks?
Yeah, when we do things like that, we would put in there what the penalties are and, the fact that it's a lien on the property, and the fact that, they can't avail themselves to the district court opportunities to legally evict a tenant without a license. So all that would go in there. And we communicate that now whenever we're dealing with people or any issues. We get people that come up like, I'm having problems with my use permit, and they mention it's a rental. And we're like, don't forget, you need to register, you need a license. You can't start using this until you have. And the use permit actually is one of the acceptable government inspections. So they don't have to pay if they get their license within 30 days of the issuance of the use permit. They don't have to pay for an additional inspection. So there's incentive there to do it. And so, yeah.
That is good to know. One other question I had was around how we do the licensing and how is it 300, or excuse me, I can't do the math, but 2 years from the date that they apply, or is it 2 years, starting January 1st and 2 years from that January 1st?
It's rolling based on when their last license was issued. So some will expire January 1st, some will be April 15th. It's just, so that's the number constantly changes as to how many are licensed because some come on and some go off. But we'd like to see the trend dramatically go up at any point in time.
From a simplicity perspective, maybe this is something we can think about as the council, but I wonder if it's easier for it to just be a January 1st and you're covered for the year and you prorate it. If you're in June, you prorate it for half a year, whatever the case is. If only because I think a lot about the way we license cars and the registration for cars. How we register cars. And you have to get your registration done every 1 to 2 years, depending on which one you pay for. But it starts, actually, no, it doesn't. It starts on the month and it's actually noted on your license plate. You're right. Okay, I will take back that idea. But
it really gets down to a matter of volume. So if all 55,000 people were properly licensed and they all had to log in on December 31st or whatever date to renew their license, you'd have 55,000 things to review, charges to process, questions to answer, people to assist. So by spreading it out throughout the year, it does break it up. And on any given day, you're dealing with 30 or 40 issues instead of 55,000 all in one day. So that's why we stuck with that rolling license date. There's part of me that would appreciate the fact that this is the day. It's clean, it's simple, it's easy. You put it on your calendar and that's it. But it really does come down to resources.
okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No. Hey, Jason, first of all, thanks recently for what you guys have done. I just want to know, moving forward, is there a way, I don't know if it got to come through the council or do it has to go through DHCD, where, say a business was going into a property and the owners of the property rented this out to their particular business, can we make it where is a mandate, a must that the property owners are telling the tenants that they need to produce what the community is asking for, like the the memorandum of understanding coming from the community in reference to certain businesses that are allowed in that particular area. Can we mandate that from the building owners themselves? Because, you know, all I want to do is, as a owner, I just want to rent out to a business. But then the business get into the property and don't know that the community doesn't want XYZ inside their community because they're memorandum of understanding. You get where I'm coming from?
Yep. So that definitely falls outside of this bill and or this information.
No, I know.
hearing.
I just was
I know.
asking because we're here.
Just for the people at home. So the licensing, if it wasn't clear, only applies with residential housing. I think what we're asking here is particularly with around the need for a use permit, where a property owner has a piece of property that has the potential for multiple uses in it. They could rent out multiple businesses to a pizza shop, a dry cleaner, a daycare center. That owner having some sort of level of legal requirement to provide advice to the business on what licenses or a use permit or whatever else is necessary to do it. I think that, to answer your question, it probably could be, you know, some kind of legislation probably could be drafted to require that. I think that in general, the law looks at those types of transactions where it is a business transaction as being two individuals that are in business that are a bit more sophisticated than a landlord-tenant residential relationship. And so traditionally, the law holds business-to-business transactions at a different standard than a general public to a business, you know, relationship. So it's definitely possible, but there is, you know, from an enforcement standpoint, when we're talking with a business owner who hasn't gotten a license or isn't operating properly, we do explain to them that you're operating a business. It is your responsibility when you're starting up this business to find out what licenses you need, what, you know, whether it's a use permit or a business license or a sales tax license, prior to renting. And so I agree with you, like, you know, in our situation that we dealt with, I think it would be good practice for a landlord or, you know, commercial property owner to advise their tenants of what's allowed and not allowed in their property, and do that in the written lease, so it's crystal clear to everyone that you can or cannot operate in this fashion, whether it is a personal preference, you know, space, annoyance to, you know, the neighboring, you know, you may not want to have a woodworking shop next to a daycare center so that the kids are sleeping and they're banging and sawing and doing whatever. You know, our situation, there was a PUD that prevented a particular use, but the landlord didn't advise anybody that they couldn't use that use. And definitely poor form, and it probably could be legislated, but I think it's, you know.
Well, again, just, you know, thank you guys for what you've done recently and the help. I appreciate it. All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and then we'll circle on this side. Councilman Bullock.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, our colleague, Councilmember Ramos, for bringing this to the floor. Just a quick follow-up on the presentation. I am encouraged by the 4 new staff members for SIU. I'm also, I thought it was an interesting approach in terms of the 3-on-1 service request. Can you talk a little bit about what that would look like, and also making sure that it actually gets enforced? Because I know sometimes that could be an issue, but can you kind of walk us through what that will look like?
Sure. So I'm supposed to have a meeting in 5 minutes with the new director of 311, Ms. Crosby. I haven't met her yet. She came on, I think, in February or March, replacing Ms. Allen. But we would set up with them a 311 request that would be specific for residents to be able to go through the app, call, or online and report a property that's not licensed, whether it's the property they live in, or it's their neighboring property, or their community leader, and they just are collecting these and reporting them. We'll collect that information. We will investigate it to determine whether or not we can support with evidence that it is a rental property. Obviously, if they have a license, that gets closed out, but if they don't have a license, then it's a question of whether or not we can substantiate it's a rental property. If we do, then we would be able to issue a citation. Operating a rental property without a license is a $1,000 citation. You have a right to a hearing at the Environmental Control Board. So if you request the hearing and are successful, or you pay the fine, you're fine. But if you fail to pay that fine, it does double to $2,000 and becomes a lien on the property, which is a lien that would drive the property into tax sale if it goes unpaid. So their pain is felt, and there is, consequences for people that ignore it completely. Obviously, if they pay the fine and still don't get their license, that's a different issue that we can deal with additional fines or litigation if necessary. But yeah, so the 311 would just open up more access to the public to be able to report properties to us.
And then just one quick follow-up. What are the difficulties you run into in terms of substantiating whether a property's a rental or not?
It really is just figuring that out. So we'll get people that file complaints with us, and then there's nothing posted online advertising the property for sale. There's no, or not for sale, for rent. There's no for rent sign when we drive past the property, looking, at the front in the window or the door. And there's no answer at the door. So we knock on the door and there's no tenant to say or there is a tenant and they don't want to get in any trouble. So they're not going to tell us anything. So, without something for us to be able to sink our teeth in and say yes, this property is not licensed. And in fact, it should be because here's a listing where it was advertised, or here's a 311 complaint where somebody said my toilet stopped up and my landlord won't fix it. Something that we can take those two pieces and then issue a citation. So that's where the challenge is.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for, I know you've made some strides in the bill that we just passed, the Renter Safety Act, and I'm glad that will be not just for the 20 or more units, but it sounds like it's for all of the rental properties that we're talking about. My question to you, Commissioner Hustler, and I know you have this other meeting with 311 coming up, but I wanted to get a sense of who you think these 33,000 that still need to be licensed are. Are they people who like mom and pops who may not know that they need to get licensed? Is it people who have just, rehabbed a property and still need to get their license? Is it the people who are just not doing it, like 1501 East 29th Street, 2829 North Calvert Street? I can go down my entire list in my district that I know of folks that are just intentionally ignoring the law. Because I think that'll help us if you kind of triage that, like where to go for low-hanging fruit to get more people licensed, but also what are the drastic measures that we need to take in order to get more people licensed. Because it's clear to me, because the courts haven't yet started to, they have in some cases, but it's really a sheriff saying, you can't evict because you don't have a license. It hasn't really been the courts. So I'm trying to figure out who this 33,000
Sure.
is.
So just that last point, in our experience, the courts are rejecting people because we get people coming over after court starts that are looking for to be able to do their licensing so they can go back to court and refile. I do know we've had conversations with the sheriff. We've worked closely with the sheriff on things, and they are also doing it. So that we applaud them for that and appreciate it. Based on everything I've seen, I think that the majority of this, I guess it kind of splits in between some people that just don't know because it is a mom and pop and, it's some extra cash or something on the side for them, and they're not a well-financed, well-organized landlord that, for better or worse, aren't licensed. I think a good number of them are people that don't have any problems with their properties, so they're not looking to evict their tenants because their tenants are paying and their tenants, are happy with the place and feel safe there. And so everything's great until it's not great. But then there is definitely a percentage out there, and we knew this going into the bill, that are going to avoid it because they're greedy, for lack of a better term, and they're going to cut every corner possible. It's the same places that we go in and inspect that, the heat constantly breaks or the roof constantly leaks. They are patching and painting and getting the next tenant in there as quickly as possible. So that, I don't have an exact number or percentage, but I think for the most part, the organized landlords are doing and want to do it right. And we get contact from them when there is a problem with their licenses before we need to reach out to them. So, if they can't register a license and they're having a problem with the system or it's not accepting payment or something of that nature, they reach out to us directly and, try to get that straight. And, because they don't want the $1,000 citation and they don't want problems with court, because even the best of landlords still have to evict people at times. I think, but there is a group that we need to do more education to reach out to, and then there's a group that we just need to go after.
So when we say going after, okay, because it sounds like you're putting SEIU folks in place, you've got the 311, so it looks like that number, that 33,000 number is gonna go down this time next year, I would imagine, by half, let's just say, right? So it's that other crew. What are the measures that we currently have to be able to say, like, come on, man, you got to do the right thing, otherwise what?
Sure. So if the citations are not working, like the one property you mentioned, which I need to get the exact address from you, but if the citations are not working, the ultimate, penalty would be for us to vacate the property. And that generally is not going to be in the best interest of anyone. Even though the tenant is in a property that is not licensed, putting them out on the street isn't necessarily a better situation. The agency, we don't have a bunch of housing that's lined up ready to put people into. So we do emergency placements when there are fires and other things, and that's difficult to do as it is. So in those situations like the one you're mentioning, it may be taking that person to district court and getting them under a court order to get their license. And I'd be happy to meet with you after this on that particular property and some other ideas that might be a potential.
Yeah, I'd like to just figure out how we get that, again, assuming in a year we have this done in half and we've got, 15,000, we still need to work. I'm just ballparking the math, but let's just say. Then, because again, people are just, this particular property, the person next door is not living in a good situation. The tenants themselves are not living in a good situation. The owner of the house next door went to court a couple of times to try to take this guy to court. Never, it's just a horrible situation, and he's just blatantly not following the law. And so we have to crack down on that, because then we're sending the message out to everybody that you don't really have to get licensed here. It says you do, but you really don't. And so it's a really big issue. So hopefully we can get that down. So I would like to follow up with you on that property and a couple others that I have as well. But the other thing is, obviously you had mentioned resources and staffing. That's obviously a recurring theme that we're hearing all day today, and the last budget hearing. So I think that obviously we've been very clear as a council about the inspectors and trying to make sure that we get the capacity that we need on the inspection. So, and I think that Councilman Cohen, with the other bill that we were talking about, also mentioned, like, get us what you need so that we can make sure that at least on the inspection side and the other side, you have what you need. But yeah, I would like to figure out what that, what that group is and who they are and how we can try to, because my thought, I know we can't do this, but we should just take the property if they're not following the law. That's a very high bar to get to in order to do that. It's not in the law right now. So we've got to figure out what those penalties are, you know, in those cases. So I appreciate that. And I think that was it. That was really my biggest question was that group as well. Thanks.
Thank you. And I think we have 2 or 3 people in-person testimony. And it's 2 that have signed up. Bill Cunningham. And then Catherine Howard after Bill.
Ramos. Boy, what an inept system that some of us have to deal with. Inept to the possibility that it's even corrupt, but that's a pretty strong statement. But good God, if you've been doing this for the past 15 years the way that I've been trying to do with it, and it's
So just say your name again.
Bill Cunningham, 541 West 27th Street, born in Baltimore, 1945, moved back in 1990. I've been here for 34 years, and I now have been almost 17 years in the community of Remington, which we have transformed in spite of the lack of help we get from the city. Sorry, guys. Just try to tell you the truth. We talk about the problems, but I want to, and Councilman Stokes is a friend of mine besides being a council person, but I have to say, do not punish the good landlords anymore. Registration occurs once a year. The properties I manage for my daughter, which I've given to her, are now inspected and licensed every 3 years. I'm one of the good guys. Why do you want me to be inspected and licensed every year while 55,000 are bad? So please don't do that. The system is working just fine as it relates to the good guys. So I have a paper that I handed out. I'm going to go to the back pages of the file that I gave you all. And I want to show you how difficult it is for somebody to deal with the city housing department and getting anything done. They throw every obstacle in our way. Thank goodness they may actually have when I can call 311 and say, I got a vacant residence here. I got a non-registered property. It's like impossible. And then once you do, it's next to impossible. Thank goodness they've got more staff. 2637 Miles Avenue, 48 citations, 1 violation, 6 failure to register, 2 failure to obtain licenses, has never been licensed, no lead paint certificate since 2004. And I stopped messing with it. We finally beat them up enough. But we can't even tell because you've got a system that wants to hide from us what happened to those citations. Who were they given to? Were the fines ever paid? Are there any liens on this property? All should be public record, and we can't find that information. Why? Protect the bad landlords. Why? Why is the system created like that? Why is the system happen that the first 2 citations, unwritten law, goes to the tenant? The tenant's not going to pay the fine. The tenant's not going to act. But why do we have a system, unwritten law, that does that? But that's how this system works. Protect the bad landlords. Why do we have that system? Maybe we're corrupt. So I'm glad to hear, so I gave you a couple, and my numbers are less than yours, of the 2 blocks, 57 properties, 20 not licensed, 35% means not licensed, and 9 of those properties are not lead certified. Boy, is it hard to deal with the system that they created. If you go and try and find out whether a property has been registered, it's next to impossible. Here's what I face. By zip code, they have this, we can search by zip code. I did, 23rd through 29th Street. 69 properties shown as inspected, only 8 are shown as licensed. I don't think that's true. Same search. Only shows the valid years registered Last time, 2021. Shows nothing about 22, 23, and 24. Click on it. You will see that. Their system is totally inept. But how about the good guys? Property I manage, 2207 Huntington Avenue. Go in there, you'll find it is only licensed, registered until 2022, and is registered until 2022, and is not licensed. But they've got a little box down below that says, click here. But if you'll click there, then it will take you, and you'll find that 2207 is licensed through 232727. But initially, you will find that the first person that checks on me will think I'm a bad landlord because I'm not registered or licensed. But when you go into and you see that I am licensed, it has a little red on there. It says, does not have an active property registration and fee must be paid. That's a lie. It's been registered, the fees have been paid, but this system is absolutely pathetic. Almost impossible to do a 311 complaint for an unsuspected rental property. I hope they address that, but it was constructed that way for a reason. Everything else we can do a 311 for, why not an unregistered licensed property? There's no box to check on 311 app. The office that is supposed to handle investigation of a licensed property is understaffed. Thank goodness they are starting to get some staff. But this also falls into a historic system of protecting bad landlords, and that's what we do in this city for some reason. Citations go to the tenant first. Insane. Almost impossible to see who the citation was written to, how much was the fine, has it been paid? And Councilperson Middleton was here, Councilperson Stokes was here when we had a big hearing a good number of years ago that nothing came out of when we stood up here and talked about lead paint in this city. There is no relationship to the city's records and the state's records as to whether to a property has been lead paint certified. And I don't even know if the housing department ties that into that registration and licensing. It should be the first thing that we tie it to, is that property, lead paint certified. And the reason I say that is 2637 Miles Avenue, which has never had, since 2004, has not been lead certified. There was a young child born there, and that young child lived there until at least the age of 5. I don't know if it has lead paint, but I know this, it doesn't. That paint property was never certified for that child to live in it. So anyway, you got a little bit of a system problem here. I'd be glad to sit down with you all, since I've been doing this for 15 years, trying to get this fixed, and just say, hey, there are some ways to fix this. And the bottom line is, it all comes to money. Create the fines big enough, and they will fix their problems. That's what we did with the backyards in Remington. When we can get them fined, because the property owner owns it, they fix it up after they get fined a couple of times. The absentee landlord doesn't, because we have to work so darn hard, because that's why you've made the system so hard for us, so that we can't do what we're supposed to do as citizens. Guy I don't respect said a long time ago, the American people have come to expect the government to do everything, and it can't. It needs our help, but you gotta stop keeping us from helping you. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next.
Good afternoon. I'm Kathy Howard. I'm General Counsel for Regional Management, Inc. We're a housing provider, and we have about 5,500 units altogether, and about 2/3 of our portfolio is here in the city. I am not going to do too much. I think the gentleman before me has hit pretty much everything that we are concerned about. With all due respect, doing an annual inspection and licensing situation, the problem is it is relatively very expensive for the landlord to do the inspections situation. You can only use a licensed home improvement inspector, and you have to pay them to come out. It's usually somewhere, if you're lucky, between $50 and $100 for for looking at a single place. We are, multifamily landlords, and that gets very expensive over time, and it should not be. To do it every year not only takes manpower on our part, but it is also very expensive to do that with a licensed inspector. And I don't really see the need for that to happen. 2 years, I think, is a reasonable situation. Most of ours, I will brag a little bit, we were in the 3-year category. Too bad that that's going to go away, but I understand why we're trying to do that. I think that it's interesting that the census in 2023 the federal government has us in Baltimore as having over 117,000 rentals. I don't know where the 55,000 and the 33,000 is coming from, but we have got to try to make sure that we know what our data amount is really going to be, and I hope that somewhere along the line we will get that information. I will say that the challenges that we have with the technology that DHCD is utilizing now for the inspection uploads, it needs some tweaking. We're trying to help with that, and we would be very happy to reach out and join anyone who would like to have a conversation about what those tweaks should look like. And with that, I will leave you alone, unless you have any questions.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
And then now we're checking online quickly. Use the raise hand function if you are online to make a testimony. And seeing none, are there any final responses from the agencies? Hold that thought. Hold that thought. I think we have someone that raised their hand. Michael Donnelly. Michael, you there?
So, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, you're on.
Okay, so my name's Mike Donnelly. I'm a lawyer. I work for Economic Action Maryland, and I provide brief advice for people that are facing landlord-tenant issues.
I can't hear you.
Be closer.
You got to get closer.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Apologies. So, my name is Michael Donnelly. I work for Economic Action Maryland. We're a nonprofit. I'm a lawyer. I work on brief advice for landlords and tenants that are facing issues. And what I just wanted to add to this conversation is there were discussions of like an absence of notice, or that good landlords don't really understand that they are not in compliance. And we already contract with the city government, and we just want to make sure. And what we're doing right now, because of this, and because this has become such a problem, is that we're going through our logs for the past like 3-4 years to send notices to actual property owners, not necessarily the property managers, so that they know that they're out of compliance. And so we are more than willing to assist with providing notice to them, and we can assist with actually getting into compliance and all of that. So that's all I wanted to add. And thank you for your time. I appreciate it, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your testimony. Okay, I think that's it. On online testimony. Yes, you want to make a final comment?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to clarify for Ms. Howard and the public, the 55,000 number is referencing rental properties. The 117,000 is rental units. So it'd be, each property may have more than one rental unit in it. So just for clarification purposes. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Any final comments to the sponsor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I forgot to ask one question, if you don't mind my asking this last one.
Yes.
Deputy Hessler, one of the things that has come to my attention also is that some of these properties that actually are licensed either have lead certificate issues, or in one or two cases, we've seen that the SDAT, the registration in SDAT, like they don't exist in SDAT, like an LLC doesn't exist in SDAT. So this leads me to try to figure out, once somebody's uploading the documents, who's checking the documents to make sure that everything is fine? Because there could be people just uploading documents, and you check the box, yep, I uploaded the documents. Who's monitoring that piece of things, and how then does a department make sure that there's action taken if there's something wrong with their documents?
Yeah, if we find issues with the documents, we end up revoking the license. There is in the code, a 10-day requirement, so they get a letter first saying that they have 10 days to make corrections or challenge the revocation, and then after that, the license is revoked. So that's what we do if we find that they've submitted inaccurate documents, false documents, uploaded the wrong thing, whatever it may be. It does fall to the staff to check those things, and the volume is still very large with what it is. So not everything is checked as timely as we would prefer.
Is that checked? Is it supposed to be checked right after uploading for renewal, or who does that? And because you have the SEIU folks that are doing the investigations and all of that, who's supposed to do that?
Yeah, it goes both ways. So some of it's based off the enforcement side, where the checks have come in, and then also within the registration office. So either one can recommend for the revocation. But the licenses are issued without the initial check, so it comes after the license is issued. Just
right,
because of the
I've had
volume.
that happen where something came up and the license was issued, and it was after the fact that it came up. And you could always revoke the license, but it's a problem if somebody lives there already. So I think that's another loop thing that we need to figure out moving forward as well. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for having this hearing. I think this was informative for all of us, and I look forward to working with my colleagues next term on if there needs to be improvements to the law. But in the meantime, we'll engage with the department and others here to figure that out. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you, colleagues. A few of us have been here all day, so I do appreciate the time that everybody spent here today. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. This was an informational hearing, so no vote is needed on this. And we don't have to vote on it. It just will go to second reader.
You don't have to vote.
Yeah, we don't have to vote on a.
We're not going to bring it back this term. If you don't want to bring it back this term, you can close it out.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and close it out. Okay. Do I have a motion to close it out?
Second.
So moved by Councilman Stokes and second by Councilwoman Ramos. And this hearing is adjourned. We don't have to take a roll call. We have to, okay, let's go. Chair Middleton, yes. Conway is a yes. Ramos is a yes. Stokes is a yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Stokes?
All I wanted to say was I can tell you in a hurry, but my answer is yes.
Stokes is a yes, and this bill will also move to second reader at the next council meeting. Thank you all for your patience. This hearing is adjourned.